We are sitting, I'm sitting in Berlin, in Germany, and our funder at the moment is in Cameroon. We are focusing in health and education projects with focus of women and children. Most of our projects are actually in Cameroon. We are active in a city called Bertua, but not only, but in this in the region. And we have some project here in Berlin, and most of our work is raise awareness to some challenges and projects that we have there, and of course to get some funds. I won't tell you about the other project. I don't think it's relevant for now, but we are very presentative in social media and the internet, so you can read more about it or contact us. About the Malaria-Free Cameroon, it's a project that started already or born years ago. It was, unfortunately, because our founder had a personal experience and saw what the malaria disease can cause, and because he's a very positive man, and because we have the Hope Foundation, said, okay, this disease can be prevented, and what can we do to do it otherwise? And then we start doing this project to raise awareness. And today is the Malaria World Day, as you all know, and we are actually doing some events. So yesterday there was a marathon. It's a run in Berlin. It's also a charity run. After in this COVID time, it actually took place in present, and we collect there. We raise awareness of malaria, and in Berlin we also collect donation. And then we we distribute mosquito nets to the people there. And on Saturday there was also a diagnostic campaign, which were aimed for pregnant women and for mothers who can come and get information, and also make tests for malaria, like a blood test. I think it's also very a short test or quick test. I don't know the official name for this. Anyway, they also got, I think they distribute on Saturday 100 mosquito nets. We also had in the past other panels and a techno party in Berlin to raise awareness and funds. And today we are in this panel, which also born from the title of this panel is can the malaria vaccine reduce the cases and deaths? And this is because I think it was in October, if I'm not mistaken, the World Health Organization has recommended the malaria vaccine for children. I think the pilot were actually in Ghana, Malawi, and Kenya, if I'm not mistaken. And after this recommended that children can be vaccinated. And also in the COVID time, we are sitting here in Europe, not affected by malaria, and talking about vaccination all the time now with COVID. So then we thought, okay, it would be a good idea to have a discussion about these themes, and why we ended you, our experts, to share your knowledge and expertise. And yeah, that's it. I wish us all an interesting and pleasant discussion. I think some new are joining us, so it's good. I'm happy about it. And I will, Miss Moshegera will moderate this session, and you will take over now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lode. Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from today. My name is Jenny Mushegera. As Ms. Lode already mentioned, I have the great honor and pleasure to moderate us through this very, very interesting panel discussion and event on the question whether the malaria vaccine can reduce cases in deaths, and we will have a global approach to this topic. I currently work in development policy, responsible for Southern Africa as a desk officer at Miserio. So it is also very interesting for me, of course, to learn more about this topic and to hear from our distinguished panelists who have a lot of experience and wisdom and knowledge that they will share with us today. So I'm very much looking forward to that. As Ms. Loda already mentioned, today is the World Malaria Day. It was instituted by the World Health Organization member states in 2007. And the 25th of April every year is an opportunity for the global community to collectively raise their voices in unison to keep malaria on a global health agenda, but also to continue raising awareness about the necessity of investment and political commitment when it comes to malaria prevention and malaria control. As we all know, malaria is a preventable and treatable disease that continues to devastate and impact the health and livelihood of many people around the world. In 2020, there was an estimated 241 million new cases of malaria and almost 360,000 malaria-related deaths in 85 countries on this planet. More than 2/3 of deaths were among children under the age of 5 living on the African continent. And there have been advances in the years 2000 and 2015, but in the latest years, we can notice and monitor that the advances are slowing and stagnating. We've not heard last year around October that the World Health Organization is recommending a widespread use of the RTS malaria vaccine amongst children. And there has been a pilot from 2019 in Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi that has reached more than 900,000 children. As the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus said, this is a historic moment. The long-awaited malaria vaccine for children is a breakthrough for science, child health, and malaria control. He continues saying, using this vaccine on top of existing tools to prevent malaria could save tens of thousands of young lives each year. So I'm very happy that we're actually talking about this miracle that we heard about last year and really discuss whether it can reduce cases and deaths, and that we have three distinguished and well-experienced scientists with us today who are going to share their opinions, their views, and experiences on this topic. But before we go deeper into this, we have some housekeeping issues, as we always have in this digital world. We have to make sure we all know how to use this tool. I think that most of us are used to Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Not many may know Big Blue Button. So first and foremost, probably when you all came in, there was a big presentation on your screen, and you're probably just seeing us in little windows. In order to remove this presentation, please go to the lower bar. On your right side, you will see a hand, and then you will see a screen, basically. If you click on there, the presentation mode will reduce and the presentation will disappear. I kindly ask you, when our speakers will hold their presentations, they will have presentations, and it would be good if you can follow the presentations with the PowerPoints prepared. Just click on that, I call it screen. Just click on that screen again, and the presentation will appear, and you also have the possibility to enlarge it or make it smaller, depending on your liking. Furthermore, please mute yourself so we can make sure that those that are supposed to be heard can be heard and there are no interruptions. We will have the opportunity for a Q&A later on. When you want to speak and you've been called upon, you can, of course, unmute yourself. Please also turn off your videos. This is very unnormal because normally our participants are always asked to turn their cameras on. Today you have the great honor to turn your cameras off. This is because Big Blue Button doesn't allow for too many screens, too many videos to run at the same time, and we want to make sure that our speakers are visible and we can experience and enjoy the view and whatever we're hearing from them. So, but you can turn your video on whenever you've been called upon to ask your questions or give your input. Then, this is a lot. I'm very sorry for this housekeeping, but we have to get through these things. We have on the left side, we have the public chat that we want to use for any questions that you have. So please write your questions in there. If you don't want to verbally speak and want to be heard, you can write your questions there and we will make sure to get them into the conversation as well. Then we have the shared notes or geteilte Notizen, which we want to use for the attendee list. This is a list that will only go to the Hope Foundation for the internal track record. So please write your name and your institutional organization into that list. If your question that you've put into the public chat or that you have voiced is not going to be answered, don't worry, we are writing all these questions down and we will give them to the speakers who will, and their responses will be sent around to all attendees. That's why it's also important that you share your name in the attendees list so we know that we will send you the questions as well. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to contact our colleagues, either Judith Elfeld or I think the person is called JE. Just click on their name and then you will have the option to write them a public chat, to write them a private chat with all your questions. Last but not least, this platform has no room for any form of racism or discrimination. We do not condone any violent language or anything similar to it. Once we notice that or hear that, we'll make sure that it will be removed as well as the person. Now we get to the program of today. The agenda for today is we have 3 amazing speakers. You were informed about 4. We're sending our well wishes to Dr. Knowles, who unfortunately can't be with us anymore today. But we have 3 amazing speakers who will share their knowledge and wisdom with us. We will start with Dr. Fabrice Boyom, who will first speak. Then we want to give the panelists the opportunity to exchange amongst themselves and maybe ask each other questions as well. Then we have our second speaker, Dr. Florence Awamu. Then again, have the speakers have the opportunity to ask questions. And this is also for you, the opportunity to prepare your questions, send them into the chat. Last but not least, we have Professor Dr. Timo Ulrichs. And after that, we will have the opportunity to all engage and exchange and ask questions to our speakers and hopefully answer the question that we all came here for. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Fabrice Boyom. Dr. Fabrice Boyom is an analytical biochemist, and I apologize from the beginning if I mispronounce any technical words today. But Dr. Fabrice Boyom is an analytical biochemist specialized in drug discovery against malaria and NTDs, which are neglected tropical diseases. He is the founder of the Department of Antimicrobial and Biological Agents at the University of Yaounde, Cameroon. As a malaria pathogen becomes increasingly resistant to existing drugs, the goal of his research is to develop new drugs with novel mechanisms of action against malaria. Although the path as a researcher can be quite challenging, as he says, he is determined to fight malaria with his expertise. As a university professor, he also sees his role in training young African scientists and building regional research capacity. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us. I'm very much looking forward to everything that you have to share with us today.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure.
Then we have Dr. Florence Awamu. Dr. Florence Awamu studied biochemistry in Cameroon and worked on the role of plasmodium-derived microvesicles in malaria-related anemia. Now she works at the Institute for Tropical Medicine at the Medical Faculty of Tübingen. She is the coordinator of CADERA project, which conducts research on emerging and re-emerging viral, bacterial, and parasitic infectious diseases. The project aims to foster research capacity and collaboration in the predominantly Francophone Central Africa region. Welcome, Doctor. Thank you so much for being with us from the beautiful Tübingen. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. We're looking forward to your input.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, we have Professor Dr. Timo Ulrichs. Professor Dr. Timo Ulrichs is a specialist in microbiology and infectious disease epidemiology and heads the graduate program for international emergency and disaster relief. Practical work took him to France, the USA, South Africa, where he was particularly interested in tuberculosis. In Berlin, he worked on the immunological questions of tuberculosis at the Max Planck Institute for Infectious Biology. Since 2001, he's been involved in scientific cooperation projects in Eastern Europe, especially in Russia, Georgia, and the Republic of Moldova. In 2006, this project formed the basis of the foundation of the Koch-Mechnikov Forum, a non-governmental organization promoting scientific partnership with Eastern Europe. In 2018, he founded the Institute for Research in International Assistance at the Akkon University of Applied Sciences, to which he brought his various research projects in health system development and medical aspects of humanitarian assistance, as well as aspects of global health security. From 2006 to 2021, he worked as a responsible officer at the Federal Ministry of Health, where his responsibilities included disease protection and pandemic influenza planning. Welcome, Professor Dr. Ulrichs. Thanks for being with us. So we will actually start off with you, Professor Dr. Timo Ulrichs. You can keep your camera on. We're very much looking forward to what you have to share with us. And afterwards, I want to ask your colleagues to ask you questions if they have any. And yeah, the floor is yours. You're still muted, unfortunately.
Sorry, I thought that was number 3 in the row as announced, but I can also start. This is absolutely no problem. I will quickly share the screen. Very short, and I oriented the preparation of my slides according to the questions that you put into the preliminary program. So the first question was about the personal perspective on vaccines against malaria. And this is what I would like to present. And as you has already heard, I'm a physician by training. I am a bit involved in immunology, microbiology, epidemiology, and public health issues. And here at the Akkon University, I am the head of a study program called International Disaster and Catastrophe Relief. But what is perhaps of interest is that I'm also involved in a scientific advisory board at the Friends of the Global Fund. So the Global Fund, as you know, is dedicated to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and is currently undergoing a certain change in paradigms. And this is why it is so timely also to talk about new vaccination approaches in malaria and a new strategy to fight malaria in high-burden countries. So the personal perspective, in short, is that, of course, malaria is belonging to the big 3 killers in infectious diseases, and that public health measures are quite successful: exposure risk reduction, vector control, also chemoprophylaxis, but of course, a prevention by vaccination, prevention of infection or at least of the disease would be very effective if it is added to the overall WHO strategy to fight malaria worldwide. And if you look at the current vaccination approaches, which are currently underway, it is, of course, very difficult to judge what is the most promising approach, but I would like to present this to you also according to the questions that you put into the preliminary program. You already heard about the importance of malaria in terms of numbers, and in sub-Saharan Africa, many children are affected by malaria. This is why an early vaccination schedule for young individuals might be very important to avoid long-term effects of malaria or a reinfection and another disease round. So vaccine development has been undertaken for a very long time period. it is very complex and difficult because of this complex interaction between host and pathogen. So we have a parasite here that can show up in different situations and also has to elicit a very comprehensive immune response, which is not so easy. I would like to give you the example that has already been quoted in the introduction. This recommendation of WHO of the vaccine candidate Mosquirix, which has been developed by GlaxoSmithKline. It is a subunit vaccine. So it consists of 3 major antigens of the parasite. And if you look into the history of the development of the clinical testings, you see that clinical phase 3 was already entered in 1992, so 30 years ago, in different African, sub-Saharan African countries. There was a vaccination schedule of a vaccination of 3 times in the beginning phase, and after 2 years, a booster. And the first data showed that it was effective in terms of reducing the malaria cases of the vaccinated population by 36%. Unfortunately, also some adverse effects have been described. So malaria meningitis in vaccinated individuals, and in the phase after the study protocol, there was the report of an increased mortality among vaccinated girls. So, however, this was submitted, the whole clinical data was submitted to EMA, and it was then recommended because of these 36% case reduction. But it has not been recommended by WHO. WHO claimed to see more studies to be performed. And this was performed in between 2015 and 2021. And it could be confirmed that there was this reduction in malaria cases among the vaccinated individuals, and also a reduction of hospitalization rate by 21%. And the different rare events of adverse effects have not been confirmed. So this is why WHO proceeded to recommend this new vaccine candidate for children older than 5 months. However, it is very a huge effort to administer this vaccination program and has not complete protection, only in a limited way. So perhaps this would be the assessment. It might not be a game changer in this whole context, but perhaps an add-on to the already existing measures for fighting malaria in high-burden countries. So here you see this malaria cycle. You are very familiar to this, I presume. Here is a summary of different vaccine approaches so far. So as malaria parasites can show up in different forms, you can try to target them by vaccine strategies. For example, a pre-erythrocyte vaccine approach would target the sporozoites, and then you have the idea of attacking the merozoites in the erythrocytes, so to enable the immune system to interact with the rapid replication time periods within the malaria disease process. Or you can try to target the gametocytes in the vector, which is also, of course, an option. And there are also approaches in so-called multi-stage vaccine candidates that will attack the parasite at different time periods within the different life cycle events. You can also divide the vaccine candidates into different groups. So, for example, a whole cell vaccine, which should activate a comprehensive immune response to different life cycle stages of the parasite, or a subunit vaccine like this one candidate that I showed you, this long development phase by the clinical phases. And new approaches would use the technologies of DNA vaccine or very new an mRNA approach, as it is pointed out by BioNTech and Pfizer. So next question for the preparation of this contribution was, will a new vaccine candidate be successful? So in terms of immunological approaches or also the ability to implement the vaccine programs into the overall anti-malaria activities, including public health measures. Of course, there should be some requirements for a very effective vaccine candidate. So it should be able to elicit a comprehensive and sustainable immune response against these different forms of the parasite. And we have to consider that they are even not only different forms, but they are in a situation of an extracellular or an intracellular parasite that resides there and has to be attacked by the immune system at different time points. So we need to activate the cellular immune response rather than the antibody production, so in order to be able to attack the intracellular situation. And we should have a vaccine candidate that is easy to form a whole vaccination program by and to implement it in countries with some weak healthcare systems and limited infrastructure. So the high burden countries have their outer conditions that also was the reason why the clinical phases took so long, over 30 years, in order to produce the results. There are some limitations, so we still do not completely understand the interactions between host and pathogens, or the host immune response, and on the one side, and the reactions, the pathogenicity islands in the genome of the parasite, also the pathogenic strategies and tactics of the parasite to escape immune responses or to hide from different sorts of attack. And this is why we have to really question the conventional vaccine strategies, because what we learned also from other infectious diseases is that it is very easy for bacteria, but also for parasites, to circumvent some of the immune responses, even to lead the immune response into the false direction, so that they can easily or more easily follow up their life cycle. Yeah. There are some new approaches, as already mentioned, the mRNA approach that has been proven by the current corona pandemic and the vaccine development here, but we can use it also for other diseases, and as the leading private companies like BioNTech already announced, they want to focus on different diseases, infectious diseases, but also in oncology, to apply this new technology for the most benefit. And malaria, of course, would be one of the very important targets. Another approach would be not considering vaccination, but so-called gene drive. So as you probably know, there is this technology CRISPR-Cas, where you can drive the genetic equipment from one replication to the next one, or from other growing, so that the parasite or the vector could be targeted in eliminating the effects of the malaria life cycle, and the overall reduction of the disease risk can be then targeted. This might be a new approach, very questionable, of course, but questionable and risky, but also very promising if this would replace the very pathogenic parasite by a more lighter version, and not resulting in severe diseases and death. So taken together, new vaccine strategies can be successful. the already WHO recommended candidate from GlaxoSmithKline can add to the already existing anti-malaria activities. However, we have to rethink our overall strategy and to combine forces from different areas of expertise, mainly from public health, that will allow us to strengthen the healthcare systems in the most affected countries. And here the Global Fund has some new ideas, not only to support in a vertical version the different approaches in diagnostics, therapy, prevention, but also in a horizontal way. And so this would be my last slide. We have more questions to be answered. Will the vaccination be accepted locally? Just to answer very quick, yes, there can be some good effects of the vaccination, and then people will be convinced and get vaccinated. These reluctance and other effects that you observe in countries of the European Union, for example, this is what you should not expect in a good vaccination program against malaria. And eliminating malaria can be possible. However, it is depending on the effects of the vaccine, so whether it is protective against infection or only the disease, but it will be helpful in any case. Can vaccination make a difference in development cooperation? Yes, of course, it can add to our setting of instruments that we have in fighting malaria, and it can add to be more effective and more efficient in this whole setting, and this will save resources that then can be invested in, for example, healthcare system strengthening. This is also the idea of the Global Fund, namely to, of course, still support the fight against malaria, against tuberculosis, and against HIV/AIDS, but also to have a more horizontal approach in the overall strengthening of healthcare infrastructure and of the combination of different approaches, as the example of malaria, namely for the non-medical approaches like bed nets, but also vector control in a more broader sense, and also the idea of including a vaccination program in this setting. Can problems arise? This was also one of your questions. Yeah, there could be some problems if there's only limited amounts of vaccine doses, and the question of distribution. This can result in health inequalities, health inequities, as we now observe it in the distribution of anti-corona vaccines, which is still an open question, also especially for WHO. So here we should really rely on WHO as the overarching institutions responsible for orchestrating research and development, but also the implementation of a new promising vaccine candidate. And what about the risk of new dependencies? I think it was meant for the dependencies between rich and poorer countries. This can be the case, of course. Here it is, this ongoing discussion is quite interesting about where should be the production sites for the corona vaccines. And they should be also, of course, in Africa and in other world regions. So to have independent production sites also controlled by WHO and by a whole consortium. So this should be transferred to the malaria situation if we will have a promising vaccine candidate, that it is not depending on, let's say, the market interests of different companies, but should be under the responsibility of WHO. So this is what I wanted to tell you from my point of view, and I'm looking forward to your questions and to the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ulrichs. This was very insightful, very interesting. I want to use the opportunity to give your fellow panelists the opportunity to ask questions to you, or maybe add, apart from what they're going to say in their inputs, of course, if they have any comments or questions to you as well. One question that I maybe have in the meantime, where do you see the role of the success for the vaccine in organizations like, for example, the Hope Foundation that does advocacy work? What role would you say do organizations like that or the civil society have in the success of rolling out the vaccine? But also, as you said, you think the communities will highly accept, or the locals will accept the vaccine. What role do you see for the civil society in making sure that happens?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So, of course, it is very important and has been shown in long-term experiences in other infectious diseases that the role of NGOs, also of local NGOs, together with the local healthcare system, is crucial. So that not only WHO comes from the outside implementing a new vaccine candidate, but that it is supported not only by the particular government, but also by the civil society, by private initiatives, also bridging in between people who are somehow involved, have some health literacy, and the other ones who have not, so that there can be smart projects be developed, how to implement, how to communicate, and how to do so, also between research and development on one side and implementation on the other side. This has been shown by this 30 years of development in clinical phases for this one candidate from GSK, so that you really had to build on experiences, on networks, in order to be successful to generate the data necessary for the clinical phases. And this would be the same situation for the implementation phase of a recommended, WHO-recommended vaccine.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Dr. Awamu, Dr. Boyom, do you have questions for Professor Dr. Ulrichs?
Yeah, very nice presentation. And I completely agree with him as far as acceptance of vaccination and will that be successful and so on. During my presentation, I'll come back to all the aspects of the problem. I mean, as far as Cameroon is concerned. So I'll have the opportunity to share my views.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation.
So very great presentation. From my end, I have no questions. So, yeah.
That's also a very good sign, Professor Dr. Ulrichs. That means you did everything perfect.
Great. Then thank you very much, and we will also have the opportunity to get into interaction after the other two presentations, so that this might be a good opportunity then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Florence Awamu, the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you very much. Let me share my screen. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I modeled my presentation based on the questions that she sent to me. And so basically the main questions were tropical disease research in general, what does it look like? How does the funding work and what impact does it have? And also personal perspectives on malaria vaccine. So my presentation is basically just giving an overview of tropical diseases, of which malaria is a part of. And then I give just a few sources of funding with emphasis on malaria, of course. And I just want to mention here that when it comes to funding of tropical diseases, there are many different sources that I could not exhaust in this presentation. I would also talk about the impact of research on tropical diseases, still with a focus on malaria, since malaria is the main topic of the day, and then I will just give a brief perspective of the on the vaccine. So tropical diseases are a group of infections that occur principally in the tropical and also subtropical regions. So the diseases are caused by various pathogens like viruses, parasites, bacteria, which are transmitted to humans by various means. The main vectors are insect vectors that are responsible for quite a number of tropical diseases, malaria being one of them, which is transmitted by the female Anopheles mosquito, but also animal reservoirs are responsible for many of such infections. So based on in general, tropical diseases are considered diseases of poverty. And based on the funding that is being allocated, so funding and the interest allocated to these various diseases, they would be classified as major tropical diseases, which would be those that receive more funding and more attention is being paid to, such as HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. But quite a number of those diseases are considered neglected. Neglected because actually a lot of attention is not only attention, but they do not receive a lot of funding for research. And according to WHO, up to 1 billion of the world population is at risk of, is exposed basically to neglected tropical diseases. And as I mentioned before, most of these are affecting poor and the most vulnerable communities. And so because there is actually no lucrative interest in developing drugs for those infections, many pharmaceutical companies are not interested, and that's how they earn the name of neglected tropical diseases. And WHO currently has a list of 20 diseases that are classified as neglected tropical diseases. But one thing I want to mention here is that in the past 10 years, a lot has been done. A lot of progress has been done in terms of funding neglected tropical diseases and also raising awareness about those conditions. And yeah, so when it comes to disease control, because this is kind of a way of me introducing the research that is going on in the field of tropical diseases. When it comes to disease control, various tools, various strategies are actually implemented for control. So the first one I want to talk about is prevention. And when you talk about prevention, there are many strategies that are put in place, like vaccine development, vector control, and chemotherapy. So as I mentioned before, this is about tropical diseases, but the focus mainly is on malaria. And in addition to this, case management is also another approach, which involves being able to diagnose the cases and the proper treatment of cases. So then when it comes to research, like tropical disease research, focus would be on the various approaches, like vaccine development, for example. Research would focus on developing potential vaccines or chemotherapy. So we have drug studies. For vector control, there are various epidemiological as well as molecular work that goes on, and then treatment and diagnosis as well. So for tropical disease research, a lot of innovative approaches and technologies all contribute to solve the various challenges that are presented, the various challenges that these diseases present. And so the various areas of focus, of course, would be drug discovery, vaccine development, molecular research, epidemiology, and many more. And so major advances have been done in the field, basically in the last, I would say, 2 centuries, using these innovative approaches. So it was actually a historic moment when WHO finally announced recommended actually the first ever malaria vaccine for wide scale use on the field on children less than 5 years of age. And so this is like a major breakthrough and advancement that has come out of research, tropical disease research. So also, I mean, with all the work that is going on and everything, this is just another headline actually announcing a promising transmission breaker that scientists reported. So basically, the scientists at the Johns Hopkins University reported that the deletion of a particular protein in the mosquito made the mosquito, so Anopheles gambiae, it made it resistant to the malaria parasite. And this would be a great means of transmission blocking strategy, which still contributes to disease control. And also, I mean, one problem with the malaria vaccine is that not only is it not like the protection is only around 30% against severe disease, but it is also very short-lived and immunity wanes down within 4 years. It's almost completely lost. So this is also another major advancement where the scientists from the University of Tokyo reported that they have actually found new details about how the immune system builds long-term memory, which is very important when it comes to vaccine development, because the goal of developing a vaccine is to produce long-term memory B cells that can keep generating antibodies against a particular pathogen. So then when it comes to disease funding, as I said, there are many different funding sources. And what I did here is to present 3 main sources. So the first one is like at the global scale. The second one is at the level of the European continent. And then this is just from a private donor. So the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria actually was launched in 2002. And the main aim of this fund is to actually generate money for research. So these are the 3 main tropical diseases that I presented in my previous slide. And I said they are considered like the major ones because they receive a lot of attention in terms of funding as well as advocacy. So the Global Fund actually is the largest financer for these 3 infections. And it basically invests in various tools, partnerships, and innovations that enable the acceleration of fight against various infections like malaria and the rest. And they actually, at the moment, they support more than half of the funding that goes towards malaria internationally is coming from the global funds to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And one of the main objectives of this fund is to be able to attain one of the global sustainable goals established by the UN, which is to interrupt malaria transmission by 2030. And so just a little bit of what they have been able to achieve in the past 20 years of their existence. When it comes to disease coverage for HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, from the year 2002, when the Global Fund was created, there has been a steady increase actually in, so for example, for the people with HIV, giving out antiretroviral therapy has seen like a steady increase ever since the fund was created. For TB, tuberculosis treatment coverage also has seen a steady increase, and in the case of malaria, they have been very, very active in distributing long-lasting insecticide-treated nets to the population. And so this has, in the recent years, there is kind of a little bit of stalling here, but still it's a lot of progress that has been made over the 20 years of existence. So as I mentioned earlier, they have been very active in distributing mosquito-treated bed nets. And by the time this was reported so this is the report for up to the year 2020, they had already distributed 188 million mosquito nets. And so between 2010 and 2019, they went from 30% to 53% population coverage, and the goal is to attain universal coverage by 2030. And also for the use has also increased, partly also based on advocacy because they work with local governments and also some non-governmental organizations. And the goal is to attain universal coverage for all of the different parameters by the year 2030. So the diagnosis, the testing also for malaria cases between 2010 and 2019 had steadily increased. So another impact they had was the trend. So in malaria cases, in countries where they invest, and they are actually showing the actual values and what would happen if there had been no malaria control. So from the year 2002, where they were created, there has been a steady decrease in the number of malaria cases. And if they had not been funding research and other intervention strategies, then it would have steadily increased over the years. And so from the year 2000 to the year 2019, there had been a 4% decrease in the cases. And so when it comes to malaria deaths, also there has been like an enormous impact in malaria deaths thanks to the funding from the global funds. So then, as I mentioned earlier, all international financing for malaria, they are actually giving 56%, which is more than half of the financing that goes to malaria. But they also do even more for TB and for HIV. They are very much involved. So this is at the global level. And the contributors here are actually various countries that would pledge funds to replenish the funds that are distributed in form of grants to various countries that apply for the grants, and then it's implemented, and that's how it goes on. So then at the level of Europe, the European Commission or the European Union actually funds also a lot of research. But I just took one example, the EDCTP, which is the European partnership mainly for clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2, mainly clinical trials in sub-Saharan Africa. And the mission is, so they really are out to enhance research capacity and also accelerate the development of not only drugs, but vaccine, and also other possible diagnostic tools against these tropical diseases. So they are present in 38 sub-Saharan African countries. And as I said, they are mainly focused on phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials, which also helps in not only intervention strategies, but also capacity building in these various countries. So without going into too much details here, as I said, they are involved in drug development, vaccine, and also diagnostic tool for various infections that do not yet have a specific means of diagnosis. And one great advancement here is the phase 3 clinical trial for pediatric, so for using praziquantel in children, which so far is only used in adults, and also they contributed to the RTSS vaccine in that the institutions that receive funding and training from the EDCTP actually participated in clinical the RTSS clinical trials. And so now for the private donor, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as you all probably know, it's a non-profit organization, and they say they are out to fight against poverty, disease, and inequality around the world. And their mission is to create a world where everybody has the opportunity to live a healthy and productive life. So they provide grants and also investments, but in this case, I'm going to talk about grants for research, where they support organizations to achieve a measurable impact against these mainly poverty-related diseases. So this is something I obtained from their website, and it actually shows the investment in Africa for the year 2020-2021. So the various diseases that they are investing in research: malaria, HIV, and a host of tropical diseases. But the nice thing is that they are also interested in neglected tropical diseases. And these are just the various countries that are receiving the funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But as I said, there are many other funding sources that I could not actually present all today. And I just wanted to give the 3 different categories of funders. And so now, the malaria vaccine. What are my perspectives on malaria vaccine was the other question. So as history has shown, vaccination is actually the most effective intervention against infections, and it is actually one of the intervention strategies that has led to effective containment and elimination and even eradication actually of certain infectious diseases. So as you mentioned during the introduction, the RTSS-A1 has been approved by the WHO for use in children on the African continent, and it is estimated to actually save thousands of lives each year. So the efficacy of the vaccine against severe disease is 30%. But so this is a study that was published last year. And what they are actually showing is that although the efficacy is actually low and it is very short-lived, combining it with other intervention strategies such as chemo prevention can actually lead to a better outcome. So in the study, they were comparing 2 possibilities. The first one was just using the vaccine alone during the seasonal malaria transmission. So when they normally administer the chemo prevention to kids just before the transmission season arrives, they did the same with the vaccine, but also they combined the chemo prevention and the vaccine, and they compared the outcome in the 3 different groups in this trial. And what they actually observed is that combining the vaccine and the chemo preventive therapy, which I think is sulfadoxine pyrimethamine, if I'm not mistaken, there was a better protection actually than just using it alone. So again, the vaccine is actually a very, I would say, important tool at this point in malaria, in the fight against malaria. And if it is properly combined with the other intervention strategies that are already present, then it would be a good way of fighting against somehow eliminating malaria. So then the possible challenges, there the vaccine is, the protection is short-lived. So then at the moment, WHO recommends 4 doses, but it's not really clear whether the 4 doses would be able to really offer like, you know, long-term protection. But there's also this sieve effect that has been reported, in the sense that the strain of the parasite that is actually present in the vaccine, in the CSP, is from the 3D7, Plasmodium falciparum 3D7. And the CSP is very polymorphic. So it has been shown that for parasites having a CSP matching that which is in the vaccine, protection is higher than in cases where there is like a genetic polymorphism or a change at the level of the CSP sequence. Just like what is observed with COVID vaccine, where due to the fact that the virus continuously mutates, the vaccine becomes less effective against certain strains. So this is one thing that has been reported, and it could lead actually to the selection of certain parasite strains in the field. And the fact that the protection is, it doesn't offer protection against gametocytes. Therefore, it's not a good, so it doesn't interrupt transmission to the mosquito. Transmission is ongoing. And the vaccine is a great achievement, but additional strategies would need to, or maybe even additional malaria vaccines with maybe more protection, and probably transmission blocking capacity would need to be also implemented for a more effective fight against malaria. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Awamu. I took a lot of notes, a lot of questions.
Oh my God.
And I think I will go first, and maybe Professor Dr. Ulrichs and Dr. Boyom have also questions or comments. But my question really is, it is a question, playing devil's advocate. You were showing what the Global Fund was able to do with its funding, and how with advocacy work and working with communities, how the mosquito nets were showing effects and they were lowering cases, right?
Yeah.
The question is, why do we then need a vaccine? Also seeing that it is moderately effective, that it's the most effective when we have other tools as well, which then also reduces the accessibility for people, right? Why don't we just use that money and continue doing what the Global Fund technically and probably the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was already doing? Why are we still investing so much time in a vaccine that is moderately effective, that is just for a certain group of people, just for children, is not a game changer, as Professor Dr. Ulrichs also mentioned? What would you say to the devil's advocate?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a very good question. The thing with the mosquito net, I mean, with the parasite or in general, is that they have a way of developing resistance to strategies that are put in place. So for the mosquito net, for example, for the longest time, it was very effective in killing mosquitoes. So it's kind of a mechanical barrier in preventing mosquito bites and therefore transmission. But lately, a lot of publications have reported resistance of the mosquito to insecticides. So the mosquito has actually evolved, and the mosquito treated nets are no longer very effective as they used to be. But the other thing is that the mosquito is also changing its habit, in that it used to feed indoors and then maybe sometimes rest on the wall. That's where you also have the indoor residual spraying and stuff. But now they are changing into outdoor, like more being outdoors than indoors. So the fact that the mosquito is evolving and this strategy is no longer as effective as it used to be, it's very important that other strategies are developed so that together it can help in quickly eliminating the disease. And that's why with the drug, for example, they do not have monotherapy, but combination therapies, because the parasite also develops resistance. And the most effective intervention would actually be a vaccine, because if we have a vaccine that can interrupt transmission, then it would help to break the cycle, and it would easily help in achieving elimination. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Boyom, Professor Dr. Ulrichs, any question, comments?
Yeah, I thank you very much for the presentation. It was good. And as far as research funding is concerned, well, you talk about the three major funders, but from the three, there's only the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation interested in drug discovery, actually, and which makes things not really easier for us who work in the domain of drug discovery. So one never knows if you have other sources of funders that can help support our research, that would be great. If not, very good presentation. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have like the list of all the funders, because this is not really, I would say, my field. I had to do a lot of research to put the presentation together. But yeah, I mean, I could look it up and maybe send you some if I find anything.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, then, yeah.
Thanks.
Dr. Ulrichs, I don't know if you've... Oh,
yeah. I also have a question concerning the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that you mentioned. As you probably know, the budget of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is higher than that of WHO. And they especially support research and development in vaccines against TB, malaria, and HIV/AIDS. So despite the fact that we do not have a very effective new vaccine candidates, but there are more in the pipeline, how would you estimate the role of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in terms of supporting the overall situation? We just learned that with the GlaxoSmithKline candidate, there were some difficulties in infrastructure, in clinical phase performance, and so on. But there is enough money and enough resources at this foundation. So how can this fit together that even the implementation phase or the clinical phase of a vaccine trial could, it is necessary to have a very concise time frame and to produce significant data. How can this be improved, that the role of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation can be used for more effective trials, for example?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have the right answer to that, but I'm going to try. Yeah, so basically one thing that I know about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as you said, is that they are more sponsoring vaccine and drug development studies. And I know that for the RTSS vaccine, for example, during the last phase of the clinical trials, they also contributed to the funding in making this happen. But one thing I would say is that a possible way to optimize the funding that they provide would be to maybe having it not at the basic research, but at a clinical level where promising candidates are actually going into clinical trial. Because when it comes to research, that is what, when it comes to vaccine development, the clinical trial is actually even more expensive than the basic research in coming up with vaccine candidates. So if they invest more in clinical trial of promising vaccine candidates, then I guess it would be a better way of optimizing the funding and also increasing the chances of developing a better vaccine against malaria. I don't know if I answered your question.
This is perfect. Thank you. I totally agree.
Okay, thank you.
We love when people agree. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Awamu. I just want to ask our new attendees that are just joining us and trying to connect. If you know someone that is trying to connect and has been unable to, we recommend changing the browser. It might be a browser problem. I think Google Chrome is one of those that work the best. Also, if you've just joined us, please, when you go to notes, to shared notes, or geteilte Notizen, please note down your name and your institution. This is very important for the Hope Foundation to know who attended for the internal track records. We're now going over to our final speaker, Dr. Fabrice Boyom. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Can you?
No.
Oh. Please, do you have my presentation on your laptop?
Christina, can you share the presentation, please? Otherwise, Doctor, I would just ask you to maybe just start and while we figure out the presentation, if that's okay with you.
Okay, that's good. I can start from here. Well, I thank you very much for inviting me to join this discussion panel. And I'm very happy to share this panel with renowned scientists. Well, I have prepared a presentation based on your questions. And to start with, my presentation will be mostly around drugs, malaria drugs. So I would say that great progress has been achieved during the recent years in terms of reducing malaria suffering by using insecticide-treated mosquito nets for prevention, and using artemisinin-based combination therapies for treatment. However, the development of resistance to the past and present anti-malaria drugs highlight the need for continued research to stay one step ahead. Indeed, since the isolation in 1820 of quinine, the first chemically purified effective treatment for malaria, a number of other natural and synthetic compounds have been developed. However, as time passed, strains of the Plasmodium falciparum parasite began to show signs of resistance towards these drugs, rendering them less effective. And accordingly, their use has been ceased or restricted to particular situations. Currently, WHO recommends foreign essential medicine for curative treatment of malaria and 4 medicine for prophylactic treatment, with the treatment formulated either as single compound or as combinations. The most effective of these are the artemisinin-based combination, which use artemisinin as the fast-acting component of the combination, and other compounds that are slow-acting and that have different mechanisms of action. Well, for the use of anti-malaria drug by the Cameroonian population, I will first talk about the knowledge of the disease symptoms. And the great majority of Cameroonian population has good knowledge of the main malaria symptoms that are fever, flu-like illnesses, including shaking, chills, headache, muscle ache, and tiredness. And what attitude do people usually adopt when such symptoms arise? They generally self-diagnose and opt for self-medication. This includes going to uncontrolled street pharmacies that, of course, lack good quality control, that lack good clinical practice to get their drugs at low cost. And it is of note that the purchasing power of the huge majority of Cameroonian population is rather low. So, consequently, the patients are exposed to fake drugs or to underdose drugs. They are exposed to sub-curative doses, and the consequence of this is the parasite is likely to mutate, and when there's mutations, drug resistance normally arise. So the next is, can the use of drugs be an indication of how malaria vaccine is accepted? I would say the attitude of Cameroonian towards vaccination is rather confusing. And I would say from my perspective, there is a huge hesitancy towards vaccination in Cameroon. And the hesitancy can be related to many factors such as religion, socio-cultural, and so on. Indeed, among many, Yaounde in 2022 indicated that vaccination uptake is still low, with less than 50% of children aged 12 to 23 months fully vaccinated in Cameroon. This is of great concern. And the real reason for this is lack of trust, lack of confidence, and perceived satisfaction. This attitude will definitely prevail when it comes to immunize children using the recently approved RTRS malaria vaccine by WHO. So there's usually a choice for the therapeutic option by the population. And based on what I've stated earlier, my view remains pessimistic, as a considerable proportion of the population will be reluctant to opt for vaccination. I will rather choose the easy to achieve self-diagnosis and self-medication. Well, for drugs, how is the work of anti-malaria drugs or research funded? Does that have an impact? The global vision on anti-malaria research in Cameroon is rather unclear, because if I can take the example of the National Malaria Strategy from 2014 to 2018, it created a vision of malaria-free Cameroon with an objective to reduce malaria morbidity and mortality by 75% from 2000 to 2018, and using the tools such as prevention, case management, communication, training and research, monitoring and evaluation, and program management. I cannot believe that Cameroon has achieved a 75% reduction of malaria burden. Besides, no strategy is implemented to contribute to the global effort to develop new drugs. I will say it again, no dollar was budgeted, for example, for the fiscal years 2017 to 2022 to support training and research into new anti-malaria drugs. So the Cameroonian research into anti-malaria drugs rather rely on international funding and international collaboration. I mean, external funding, external collaboration. So as far as my unit is concerned, I mean the antimicrobial and bird control agent unit at the University of Yaounde 1. I founded this unit back in 2009 with the vision of improving the health and well-being of people burdened by infectious diseases of poverty through research and innovation towards the elimination of specific entities. And the mission is to discover and further develop heat inhibitors of the causative agents of malaria, leishmaniasis, human African trypanosomiasis, amoebiasis, and borrelial ulcer. And this is achieved through the screening of natural products and libraries of small molecules. To achieve this, we have partnered within the last 10 years with African and South African public and private institutions to discover anti-infective agents. And we have suitable facilities and expertise to do this work. Our collaborators, we have a number of them, and I've listed Medicine for Malaria Venture. We partner with them since 2012. We have the Centre Pasteur du Cameroon. We have the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. It's in India. We have the University of South Florida. That's mainly for the study of natural products. We have the University of California at San Francisco. It is for the screening against clinical isolates of Plasmodium falciparum. And we have the University of Ghana. We support us in medicinal chemistry. We have H3D, the H3D, which is the first and unique integrative research center in Africa as far as drug discovery is concerned. They support us in the many aspects of our research. And we have the Wellcome Center for Anti-Infective Research. This is at the University of Dundee, Scotland. They usually support us in screening our hits and in training our students and postdocs. We have the Merck pharmaceutical companies that provide funding and chemical libraries of small molecules. We have the Johnson & Johnson that also provide huge amounts of chemical entities for drug screening. We have the Isai Pharmaceutical Company. We have Pfizer. We have the Guangzhou Institute of Biomedicine and Health that supports us in the study of drugs against borrelial ulcer. And amongst funders, I'll list the Medicine for Malaria Venture, I'll list the British Society for Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, I'll list the African Academy of Science, that is supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation within the framework of Grand Challenges Africa. We have Merck, and we have the NIH. So what's the measurable impact to date? For research achievement, we have, or I would say, have successfully contributed. The antimicrobial and biocontrol agent unit has successfully contributed to screening of thousands of compounds from in-house and partners' laboratory to discover potent inhibitors of Plasmodium falciparum, which is a causative agent of malaria, Toxoplasma gondii, Antimobile histolytica, and so on. And we have been able to characterize two novel lead compounds against malaria, two novel lead compounds against Human African trypanosomiasis, two novel leads against leishmaniasis. For capacity building, I've been able to complete the training of 24 PhD students and over 50 master students in the field of biochemistry of natural product and drug discovery against malaria, leishmaniasis, Human African trypanosomiasis, amoebiasis, and so on. And I am confident that they will continue the work in the field of drug discovery in Africa. We have also published over 200 research papers in peer-reviewed journals with over 2,700 citations. And as far as international standing is concerned, within the last 10 years, our achievements have greatly impacted our international visibility and respect. Now, will malaria vaccination be successful in Cameroon? Is vaccination accepted in Cameroon? I would say that with the advent of social media, the conspiracy theory is disseminated and has taken roots in the attitude of people facing misunderstood events. The world as a whole has experienced this situation in many occasions, and most recently in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. I do not believe that the Cameroonian population will escape this wave of suspicion that manifests in the burden of vaccine hesitancy. Thus, I believe that vaccine hesitancy should be assessed at national scale to identify sources of misinformation that are the origin of non-acceptance of vaccines, including the recently approved RTSS malaria vaccine. Can vaccination help eliminate malaria? I would say, although the RTSS vaccine against malaria does not offer full protection against malaria, it reduces the risk of contracting malaria by about 40%, and the risk of hospitalization for severe malaria by approximately 30%. Thus, I presume that if repeated doses, vaccine doses are administered, this might contribute to eliminate malaria in settings where there is acceptance and appropriate compliance. And the last one is, can problems arise? I would say yes, of course. Problems may arise in settings where adequate infrastructure is lacking. What I mean is to definitely a problem of availability of the vaccine, people in need. Thank you. This is what I have to share with you today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boyom. Thank you. Of course, I also have a question for you. I actually have multiple, but as time is running, I will limit myself to one question. As someone who also often travels to a country that is malaria, was transmitting malaria, I often have a discussion with doctors here, but then also family members at home that prophylaxis versus just getting malaria drugs when you actually get malaria and you're there. What would be your recommendation? Do you think it makes sense to take the prophylaxis, which you often have to take for 4 weeks, versus taking the malaria drugs that you have to take for 4 days in case you even get malaria, which is also not often the case? What is your take on this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, prophylaxis is from my view is not the way to go when someone lives in endemic area, you know. But for travelers, taking prophylaxis is actually the only option that can prevent a traveler from getting severe malaria at arrival. You know, prevention is better than cure.
Right.
So it is better to take, when you plan to travel to an endemic setting, you should normally take prophylaxis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Thank you very much. I will take note of this now that you've said it as well.
Yeah.
I will listen to this advice. Thank you very much. Dr. Awamu, I see you turn on your camera. I assume you have a question, a comment.
Yes, I do have a question. So thank you already for your presentation. I am from Cameroon, so I can relate to most of the things you said, especially self-medication. It is something that is really very common in Cameroon, and you can buy malaria drug in the market, on the street, everywhere. And I mean, most people, I myself included in the past, would used to take it until I feel better. Then I stopped taking it. And it's a very big problem in Cameroon. So my question is, what do you think the government can do to regulate this accessibility to malaria medication?
Yeah, thank you for raising that point. The government has during the past tried to regulate this sector of street pharmacies. I mean, to prohibit street pharmacies, because malaria drugs are not that expensive. You know, they are not. Even though I said, wow, the purchasing power is very low, but it is not a big deal to go to a pharmacy and buy a good drug, because for most, in most cases, you know, what you get from street pharmacies is either on the dose or fake. So there's no valuable choice between the two, to buy on the dose drug or to buy a fake drug. If you buy a fake drug, then you will definitely get bad with malaria. You may die from malaria. When you get drugs that are on the dose, I mean, there's not enough active principle in the drug. The consequence will definitely be that the parasite will be exposed to sub-inhibitory concentrations of the drug, and this will definitely lead to possible mutations in the genome of the parasite. And when mutations arise, the direct consequence is the development of resistance for a particular drug. So what the government can do is to use the strength, I mean the power that is normally available to prohibit or to destroy the street pharmacies. That's the only way, because Cameroonians sometimes are really stubborn. If you don't use the power and go ahead, then they will never stop doing stupid things. That's the only way. That's the only way. On another hand, families rely on those pharmacies to live. That's a whole business for some families, and it is not that easy. So it's a complex situation that the government has to address. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Ulrichs, I see you.
Yeah, just a short question coming back to the vaccine questions. You just mentioned briefly the vaccine hesitancy and that it was necessary to put some research into this question. What is your own estimate, as you are from Cameroon? What is about vaccine hesitancy in your country?
Well, I can give you an exact figure, but it is actually very high. It is actually very high, and I'll just go back to the example of polio vaccine. When it was planned to immunize young girls or young children at school, well, the parents rather decided not to send children to school. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem. Yeah, vaccine hesitancy is actually very high in Cameroon. A study, the study I mentioned is about 50% of children aged 13 to 12 to 23 months are not vaccinated, and this is due to vaccine hesitancy. So the government and NGOs have a great work here. Yeah, they should work to understand what is at the basis of this hesitancy. What is the basis? From where comes the misinformation? Yeah, that's a good research topic, to understand the profile of vaccine hesitancy in Cameroon and to find ways to address it.
Okay, so a potential solution would then be to increase health literacy. I mean, we have a similar problem here in Germany, so that we can reach out to these people by explaining, by communicating in a smart way. But it is very difficult. I totally agree.
Yeah. What I said this is social media. People disseminate fake informations and so on. And one way to tackle this, according to me, is to actually be very strict. Be very strict at the level of dispensing information and so on. Controlling what is said in social media when it comes to very important issues such as health.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this was the first research question that we're giving to the three of you, whoever wants to pick it up and actually do the research. I agree. I think it's a very, very important research question that even with the corona vaccine, we already saw that it was not only in Cameroon, but I would really say across the continent, there was a big hesitancy based on previous experiences that the continent has made with vaccines, and then also the disinformation, of course, and then also the perception of, at least when it came to COVID, this is a Western problem. So maybe it will now change, since we can say it is a sub-Saharan African problem, malaria. Maybe there will be a shift in acceptance, but I think history is definitely, and misinformation is definitely playing a very big role here. I would like to invite all of our attendees to raise their questions. There is the possibility to write the question in the chat, and then we will read it out, or on the very right side on the bottom, you see a hand. You can raise your hand and we will call upon you. You can then you can unmute yourself and turn your camera on and direct your question to our panel. Kindly introduce yourself shortly and also mention who you direct your question to. I see there's already one question in the chat, and I think all three of you would be able to answer this. What do you think of an African country producing the vaccine? Is this would be get better? Or maybe JE, can you speak out the question and say what you exactly mean? Because there's two ways to understand this question. So would an African country producing the vaccine raise the trust in the vaccine? I think this is what you want to ask. Yes.
To improve vaccine coverage, right?
I think to reduce the hesitancy. I think one of the hesitancy when it also came to COVID was that it is from Westerners, and that based on the experience that was made before with vaccines and the effects that it had on many people, that maybe when an African country produces it, there is less hesitancy and more trust in the vaccine. Do you think that would do something? Would that have an effect?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is producing vaccine in Africa is not a big problem, you know. The basis of all this should be infrastructure. When there's infrastructure, then everything can be possible, because we have talents in Africa. We have talents. Then it is possible to implement vaccine production and so on. Well, and to develop trust into this vaccine, that will be at the level of policymakers. But actually, it is possible. We have talents. What we are lacking is infrastructure.
Yeah, I totally agree with them that producing the vaccine in Africa itself is going to develop trust in the people, because most of the argument that they bring forth is that they don't know what is actually in the vaccine, and they don't trust that what they say is in it is actually in it. So I think it would be many more people would be convinced if it is actually produced in Africa. But I think that the main thing is actually awareness, raising awareness, and also educating the public about all those things, because most people they don't see the need for a vaccine. And as they would sometimes say, if they do not see the danger, then they don't feel it's important. And it's just educating the public and making them understand that it's very important. I think it's also going to help a lot in raising the trust.
And maybe to add on that, without being a malaria expert, I think since the first rollout of the vaccine is for infants, for children, I think that even raises the hesitancy, because who wants to, not knowing what is in the vaccine, right? We already with that trust issue, and then wanted to give it to your child. I think that is not very helpful to the case of raising trust and just making everyone comfortable. So I think it is, I understand the argument why that is the priority group, because they're so at risk. But it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, they were reporting from Malawi that the reaction was very positive, but it would be very interesting to see if that is really something that we can say across the board. And Yeah. I have another question. Oh, there's one in the chat. Could global warming, so I see the questions are coming in. They can keep coming in, let them come in. Could global warming lead to the spread of tropical diseases to areas far beyond?
I guess this is addressed to me. Yes, definitely. It's a big risk of global warming. And when we talk about tropical diseases, for example, in the recent years, we've been talking a lot about Zika virus. Zika actually is a disease that spread from the niche to other areas and also in the end in Europe. That is like a very practical example of what can happen. And since, as I said earlier, most of the insect vectors that are responsible for transmitting these diseases live in different ecological niches. Once conditions are optimal, for example, with the international travel, it's very easy to transport mosquitoes from one area to another. And if the conditions are optimal, then these mosquitoes establish, and it can actually lead to disease transmission, or maybe people traveling that are carrying the disease, and with the vector being present, it can also lead to transmissions in areas where it was not before. I mean, even yellow fever is something that was transported from Africa to the rest of the world. So that's a possibility. And with global warming, it is even more alarming. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Do you agree? Do you want to add something?
I agree. That's
Thank you very much. The next question and comment is, we just talked about enhancing health literacy. I think this is one of the main problems in sub-Saharan Africa, and not only related to malaria. How could this be improved and enhanced, especially where social media is not a fully trustworthy forum?
well,
Yeah.
this is sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, I want to mention that this is quite related to scientific citizenship. You know, scientists should be closer to the public, closer. I mean, in my field, when I talk about drug discovery, when, for example, I go to the field to collect plant samples that should be investigated to search for new drugs against malaria, well, I have to discuss with local populations to let them know that what the work we are doing is to find new drugs to fight malaria and so on. I mean, scientists to be able to be closer to those for who research definitely is targeted. You know, so that's an approach to mitigate this kind of hesitancy and so on. Well, there are ways to address this type of issue.
Thank you. I like the word scientist citizenship. I think this is it's a strong word, and also gives back the responsibility at some point that everyone in every profession, I think, that we have a certain responsibility.
Yeah.
So Dr. Ulrichs, you also wanted to.
Yeah, so of course, the responsibility for his or her own health is very decisive. So we should also start with good health literacy in school times, so that school children are educated in a way to stick to healthy environment, healthy food, and everything that has to do with this, and also be informed about the different and more complex situations. So, for example, having basic knowledge about the life cycle of malaria, which is the basic understanding for what the vaccines are for, or what and how effective anti-malaria drugs are. So here you can really step in and really make a difference. We actually have a small project in collaboration with the so-called West African Science and Technology Center, where we try to support young researchers and scientists from Ghana and Western African countries in transmission and transfer of knowledge to the general public, and also at different ages, so in schools, but also later on in different professions. And this is where we try to show how our professionals in health education and communication proceed, because in Germany we also have many problems in good communication in terms of health. We see that now during the corona pandemic, but that we can learn from each other, and that we enable them to particular address the health problems in the region.
Thank you very much for this. Antonia is asking, why are there more and more resistant pathogens? Maybe you can go right away, Dr. Ulrichs.
Yeah, so I am a bit more in the field of tuberculosis research than in malaria, and from TB, this is a very good example to illustrate how resistances emerge. Maybe this is due to false treatment. So you have enough antibiotics in your hands to allow a combination therapy of 4 drugs for a drug therapy over several weeks and months. And if you leave out one of these 4, or if you have no knowledge about already pre-existing resistances, then you generate new ones, because the pathogen can adapt and can, in different replication cycles, learn from how these antibiotics function, and then have genetic alterations in order to escape from these effects of the antibiotics. And false treatment is one of the major reasons, and also non-adherence to a treatment regime also results in the emergence of resistances. In malaria, it is a bit similar, but as the parasite is a bit slower than the bacterium, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, it is also so that we have a constant competition between our human intelligence in generating more antibiotics and the different pathogens in adapting to them and developing over rapid replication cycles new versions of these pathogens, escaping from these antibiotic threats. And here we have a general problem, which is the multi-drug resistance and the general antibiotic resistances. So we, or WHO estimates that we will have this as a major health problem in about 10 years worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dr. Boyom, do you want to add anything, or Dr. Awamu?
Yeah, that's it. I completely agree with him. But I got a power shutdown. Sorry. I disappeared for a few seconds. I'm back. Yeah, I wanted to know, was it about the question, why are there more and more resistant pathogens?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, if it is about that question, I completely agree with Professor Ulrichs. And I would say the other important cause for this is to use fake drugs and what recent earlier called on-the-dose drugs. You know? Yeah, because the parasite is, constantly trying to escape the drug efficacy, and then when the dose is not enough, when it is not at the curative level, then the parasite will escape and then develop resistance. Well, there's a way to mitigate this. Since I've worked for very long on natural products. When we use crude extract, crude plant extract, what we are trying to do now is kind of formulate anti-malaria drugs based on extract, not pure compounds, because extract are actually what I can call polypharmacies. I mean, the extract contain dozens of different compounds that definitely act different ways, you know, and they contain the different compounds have different mechanisms of action, different metabolic targets, and then it will be rather difficult for the parasite to develop resistance against a plant extract as compared to combination of 2 or 3 or single compound. So we are exploring the way of going polypharmacies instead of combinations of 2 or 4. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see there are people typing, and I would kindly ask you to send in your questions because we're slowly coming to the end. So if you have your questions, the time is now. Feel free to also raise your hand and speak as well. So we have Judith asking, you said that one challenge related to malaria prevention is that the parasite is able to change and adapt. So the vaccine approved by the WHO, do you think was the best candidate? Do you think it will create a long-term immunity? This is open to anyone who feels able to answer this question. I mean, we were already talking about it not being a game changer, it being moderately effective.
Yeah, and just one single tiny instrument, not a big weapon in the fight against malaria. However, it is an attempt, and there will be more candidates to come up in this development pipeline. And we should better rely on a consequent implementation of the other measures against malaria. So bed nets, vector control, and everything else. Also health literacy, by the way. So in order to ensure that the parasite has reduced chances to spread. And if we decrease the overall number of parasite carriers among the human population, then there will also be a lower risk for the others to get affected.
Yes.
Yeah, so I totally agree actually with Professor Ulrichs. And for a malaria vaccine or any vaccine at all, an ideal candidate would be one that offers 100% immunity, and it is targeting like a conserved gene of the parasite that would not, quickly change over time, and that is able to induce long-lasting immunity. That would be the ideal. And if we look at that, then of course this was not the best candidate malaria vaccine, but it is definitely a step forward. And as many more candidates are coming up, we are hoping combining it, as Professor Ulrichs said, with the other intervention strategies to be able to achieve more impact, long-term impact.
I'm sorry, I have to leave you right now because I have to join another meeting which has already started at 8. So I'm a bit late for that too. So thank you very much for having me and for this vivid discussion. And I wish you all the best for your projects in your Hope Foundation. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ulrichs, for taking your time and being late to the other meeting. We really appreciated your presence and all your inputs and insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. So we have another question by Elsa. She's asking, maybe it has already been said and I missed it, but now it moved. But is there an mRNA vaccine in development?
So I can start. an mRNA vaccine in development. I don't know if the development has already started, but I know that sometime last year, towards the end of last year, BioNTech actually announced that they were going to also produce an mRNA vaccine against malaria. And they were aiming to have candidates by the end of 2022. So it is something that is being discussed. I don't know if the work has already started, but it is definitely a way that is being considered for developing malaria vaccines.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Dr. Boyom, do you know more about it?
Yeah, no idea.
We thought maybe since you work with BioNTech that you may have insider information
Sure.
on this issue.
Sure.
So I think this is the second last question we were asked tonight. First, I want to thank all of you for your time and your very interesting speeches. We can raise awareness by talking to our families and friends and share funds you have. But do you have any wishes or idea? What else can we do to fight for the elimination of malaria? Dr. Boyom, what do you think?
Yeah, that's, to address that issue, everyone should feel concerned, It's not, when it comes to fighting malaria, eliminating malaria, it should not be a problem restricted to the scientists. It should not be a problem restricted to the policymakers.
Mm-hmm.
But there should be a public acceptance of what is proposed, actually,
Mm-hmm.
If the hesitancy continue to persist, then it will be difficult. It will be very difficult to address this issue in a positive way. So it's the contribution is expected from each end, from the scientists, from the policymakers, and from the population at risk. That's what I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't have much to add to what Professor Boyom said. Yeah, so basically a holistic approach has to be used in addressing this issue. And as he said, everyone has to feel somehow involved. But the thing is, I feel like some entities would have more impact if they get involved than others. Because during your presentation, you said that in Cameroon, for example, no funding is allocated for drug research, for example. That shows how much the government is not interested at all in malaria research. And I feel that this also reflects at the level of the policies, and then it goes down the chain. And it would really be good if somehow the government could put in place strategies that would target not only maybe the people that go to hospitals, but maybe starting from schools and trying to reach as many people as possible to be able to have like a more, I would say, chain effect. Because I remember actually growing up, we had a song that we used to sing in school about malaria. That was in primary school. Even without understanding what it meant, we would sing it, and then they would tell you the first thing to do, for example, is to keep your house clean, everything clean, and then if you feel sick, you take the drug and things like that. And the fact that you grow up singing it, it just becomes a part of you. And I feel that if they do the same in hospitals, for example, with women coming maybe for the antenatal, taking time to explain things to people, because I feel that that is what is basically lacking. People who don't receive the proper information, or nobody takes the time to actually explain to people what is going on. And it makes it that most people don't feel involved, because if they don't understand, then why would they feel involved? And I just feel that it would help a lot if awareness is raised at many levels. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the most important things, and from everything that we've heard today, whether the vaccine is effective or not effective, or just a part of a whole intervention, control, elimination process against malaria, I think we should not and we cannot forget that this also requires some political willingness of our governments and certain structures that need to be in place. So even if we have a perfect vaccine, even if we have an effective vaccine, the WHO is not able to roll it out without collaborating with our local governments. So I think to my fellow activists, to my fellow lobbyists, to my fellow advocacy people, I think it is important that we shouldn't forget that yes, we do the advocacy work, but it's also important that we do the political lobby work in order to raise awareness about these problems, so that when we have effective solutions, they will actually come into an infrastructure and into structures where it will be fruitful. Because I think there's also the question of, okay, accessibility, equity, and all these things. And it's important that there's structures in place so that when our scientists do the amazing work of giving us solutions, that they're actually effective also and arrive at the people that need it the most. So I want to use this opportunity to thank you both, and of course, Professor Dr. Ulrichs, who has left us, for being with us today and to give us nuggets and ideas, inspirations as well, for everyone, for the scientists, for the advocacy people, for the lobbyists, for everyone who is interested in this topic and wants to advance it and also contribute to eliminating malaria, just for being with us, sharing your knowledge, and yeah, being an inspiration to all of us. I think, let me check. I don't know if the Hope Foundation wants to say something. I think the founder wanted to write something, so I will give him a bit of time and just bridge the time with saying thank you very much again. Thank you for all the participants, for being part, for asking the questions. Thank you so much to the Hope Foundation for having me, but also for having the speakers and doing such a great selection of people who are from the field, who talk to people on the ground, and who can share that all with us. I see also, thank you very much, is in the chat. So this is amazing. Dear Hope Foundation founder, have I bought you enough time? Do you want to say something? Or just write it in the chat. Are there any last comments from our audiences? Feel free to just raise your hand and speak, so we hear different voices than just my own and Dr. Awamu's and Dr. Boyom's voices. But yeah, thank you so much. Do you have any last comments? Dr. Awamu, Dr. Boyom?
Yeah, well, this very good, very good. I mean, this is the World Malaria Day, and I'm very happy to be part of this discussion panel. We have shared our views, and we believe that tomorrow will be a better day as far as malaria control is concerned. But to that end, we all have to join our efforts, because as I usually say, a single hand can never make a packet. So let's keep together, let's work together to achieve this target, which is the malaria elimination. And thank you to the Hope Foundation. That was great. There's about, I think it's about 2 or 3 months now, I've been interacting with you guys, and I really appreciated the way you people work to specifically address the malaria issue in my country, which is Cameroon. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and may God bless you, for you to have more strength, more resources to reach this target. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boyom. Dr. Awamu.
Yes, so I want to thank you. Thank you to the Hope Foundation for giving me this opportunity to actively participate in the World Malaria Day. So as you said at the beginning, malaria is treatable, it is preventable, And having the opportunity to raise awareness actually is something that I really very much appreciate. I want to thank my fellow panelists for the great presentation. I've learned a lot from you people, and also to you, Ms. Mushegera, for the great job moderating. You've actually done a very great job. So thank you very much. Thank you to all those who joined us, and thank you for your great questions.
Thank you very much. And we have the final words from the Hope Foundation founder. On behalf of the community we serve back in Cameroon, we wish to thank you all panelists. It was an interesting talk and discussion, especially from first-hand professionals like the invited panelists, Dr. Boyom, thanks, Dr. Awamu, thanks, and Dr. Timo. Thanks a lot for all the relevant information given to us. We will be happy to have your opinions again in the future. We'll take advice into practice to improve our work at community level. And let's all pray for malaria-free Cameroon in the future. And may I add, a malaria-free Africa, a malaria-free world. Thank you very much to everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And yeah, hope to see you soon in different platforms, and let's continue to work together and exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.